Welcome to the first episode Talking Wrestling with Tony and Catch. As you know, this is Dusty Wolfe, my brother-in-law, and he's going to tell us some stories.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 yo, go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day. I'll be making moves till I'm buried in my grave.
Well, so this first episode of Talking Wrestling, hopefully this is a thing we can continue to do.
All right.
So, first of all, there was one story that you told that we first met. Something about a bar.
That could be any place.
About leaving a chick outside, I think you said.
Oh, that was here, me and Ken Johnson. Yeah, we don't need to revisit that one too. Yeah, but yeah,
but yeah, Tony does have a couple of questions for you.
All right.
So what's your first question, Tony?
I'm real curious. We've heard about these guys had a lot of backstage politics. They were basically running the show. My question to you is, did you have any interaction with the Clique?
No, I left. Sean was just splitting from Marty. I helped start Scott Hall. Mm-hmm. I don't know Nash.
Okay.
And I barely know Waltman. But I was been around Sean since he started. But when I was there, it was still him and Marty as a team, and so he hadn't evolved into the Clique stories and all that. Mm-hmm. And like I say, Nash, I helped start Nash, Kansas City, and I didn't see him again for 8-10 years. So okay. I was gone in 93, and the Clique started 94, 95.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just wondering because we've heard so many stories about.
Don't doubt him.
And I was just wondering.
Don't doubt him. There's no doubt that they. I mean, even Sean admits it.
Yeah,
I've been around Sean since when he came home for a while after he got hurt and came home for a while. I was around him constantly in those days, and he owns it. Mm-hmm. Nash owns it. So it's just one of those things. Yeah, they pretty much ran that show for everything I was ever told.
Yeah. That's good.
And I've told them before, according to you, from watching all the shows that you watch, that the dark side of the ring, the stuff on that is pretty much how it happened.
Most times, you'll see a little, like the other day when they were talking about Harley. I watched the Harley one the other day, Harley race. I watched that one the other day. They talked about how he went in the building and burned the ring down. He didn't do that. He burned the ring truck. It's not like it's a huge detail, but it is a huge deal in reality because it's how do you get past security and all this other stuff and burn the ring in the building and whatever. That didn't happen. He did burn the ring truck down in the back of the Kemper. I think they were working in that night. But I haven't seen one yet that wasn't at least 85-90% accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Now we do have a question from T-Bass. He's one of our regulars.
Uh-huh.
Says he watched a bunch of your videos on YouTube today. One question was
that's my hair.
The wig you had when Brutus cut your hair. Your hair looked different.
No, that's my hair. That's my hair. There was no way you would have kept a wig on for that long. I mean, it's
right.
Yeah, it was mine. Whatever looked different, I don't know, but it was mine.
Yeah. So the other question, one of the other questions you had was about that Tony wanted to ask was about the airplane ride, the infamous airplane ride.
Oh yeah, the plane ride from hell.
I wasn't around then, but I've talked to a couple of guys that were on it, and from everything I've heard, they got by with a lot. I mean, it was from everything I've heard, a handful of them should have been in jail. You or I would have been.
Well, that was when you're in the air like that. That's a federal offense to disrupt a plane ride like that. And I mean, there was enough debauchery on there for 10 court cases.
Which, yeah. Uh, from what I've heard, like I say, some of those boys were lucky they didn't go to jail. And, what you hear, then you can multiply it by a little bit because there was some. I don't know for a fact there was sexual assault, but I've been told that there were things that were just right up on the line of being sexual assault and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there was one particular wrestler in particular. We all know who it is.
Yeah,
that had that.
Yep.
That charge against him.
Yeah. Well, I didn't hear that part ever, but if he did, from the stories I've heard, he's lucky he didn't go to jail.
Right.
That's from the guys who were on the plane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you were there, we'll say the late 80s, and you were gone in what,
97 to 93.
Okay. You worked with Randy Savage, right? Macho Man? Okay. What was it like working with him? I heard he was a perfectionist.
Very much so. And intense. There was no off button with him. He was always straight, on. He was always Randy Savage, Macho Madness, and all that. It wasn't a gimmick. It was really him. Yeah, it was him. Perfectionist, yeah. I mean, when you're having a little TV match with him, it's really difficult to mess something up or have something go really wrong. But I've seen nights where something would go wrong and he would go ballistic instead of just, it's human. It happens. We're out of here. You lose it. Yeah.
Wow. Now, did you get your start in the territories?
Yeah, here in San Antonio.
Okay. Which one?
Southwest Championship Wrestling with Joe Blanchard. Tully's dad.
Oh, okay.
It was when I started in '82. It was all still territories, including Vince's.
Right. I'm in Minneapolis, so we had
Vern. Vern, yeah.
Yep. Vern.
And, it was all still. In fact, he was when I broke in. He was probably the hottest territory in wrestling. If Georgia wasn't.
Yeah. See, we were lucky enough when they started to get the other channels. We had the AWA, and then we also had Georgia wrestling.
Yeah.
That's where I got my first look at Animal and Hawk, the Road Warriors. I found out years later were from Minneapolis.
Right.
And but we didn't get like WWF up here.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got it up here to watch, all of a sudden Hogan was the champion.
Yeah. Well, that was that whole story. It was when he wasn't going to go with the whole gimmick, and at that point, Hogan with the movie was like the hottest thing in wrestling.
Yeah, because he was the year before that aired. He was here, and I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes or anything like that. Then all of a sudden, he was gone.
Yeah,
and he never got the belt.
Yeah.
But then to let Hogan tell it, Vern wanted like 50% of what the Hulk Hogan merchandise would make.
I don't know about all that. I know there was just it's been so long now. You can hear so many different things. I know part of it was Gagne didn't want to go the direction of Hogan. That was too gimmicky for Gagne and his belt. Even he had gimmicks underneath. You were there, so you know what I'm talking about. He had gimmicks underneath, but his main event was wrestling.
Yeah.
It was him and Robinson, or it was Bockwinkel and Robinson, or him and Bockwinkel. You go down the list, and even guys like Crusher that were gimmicks still had to work in that main event. Mad Dog, was a tremendous amateur, so he still had to go. That was Gagne's formula. And
right.
He wasn't going with Hogan. He was not going to go with Hogan.
Yeah, matter of fact, he put that. I mean, as soon as Hogan left, he put the belt on Rick Martel, who was a wrestler.
Was another one, and Teruta, and you just go down the list. The closest thing he ever came to a gimmick was Hanson, who could go.
Yeah,
just he was a gimmick. And Vern at one time, like I said, Vern had like the biggest territory. It had the hottest territory in wrestling at one time.
He I guess I don't know how true this is. Rumor has it Vern would play Madison Square Garden, would actually sell it out
when he was a young man.
Yeah.
When he was a young man, because he was in the mix with Thiz when he was a young man in the early 50s. That's the whole reason he was able to get into Minneapolis.
Okay.
Yeah, because he was so over. Vern, Fritz, there's a handful of those guys that Lawler,
Hmm.
they got over so big in at least 2 or 3 of the main towns for these promoters that it was cheaper to give them a percentage of the office than it was to try to keep paying them and hope they don't go somewhere else. And so that's how Vern ended up with the whole territory.
Right.
He
Yeah,
was
'cause
just he was
he
just that
ran
big.
everything. He ran everything up here.
Yeah, and he was that old Chicago TV.
Yeah.
I think it was Dumont Network
Mhm.
before our time.
Yeah, way before our time.
Yeah, one for, but that was drew huge ratings for the Dumont network. It was Chicago Marigold Arena, I
Hmm.
think it was, and Gagne was on top there. And in fact, the whole reason he started the AWA was they wouldn't give him the run with the belt with the NWA. He had he could draw in New York. He drew in the Midwest. I mean, he actually drew better than Thez.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because Thez never could draw in the East. Thez could draw in the South. He could draw in the Midwest, but that was it. And on the West Coast, some.
Did Vern outdraw Bruno?
No, I don't think anybody outdrew Bruno until he got to Hogan. I don't think that's the reason Bruno came back the second time was.
Okay.
Pedro told me this himself. He said I could do good business from Washington to New York, and then from New York to Boston and Boston on up. He said I didn't do business. Not like Bruno. Okay. Bruno did business everywhere up on the East Coast. I don't think anybody broke his records until Hogan came along.
Yeah. Okay.
And then T-Bass again, during your WWF stint, who are the big name guys that actually looked out for just trying to make a living? I've seen one of your interviews that you said Bobby Heenan was a really cool guy.
Yeah, Heenan was a great guy. Everybody was there to make a living. I mean, that's what that's the whole reason you went there. As far as somebody that might have looked out after me a little bit, Martel, Jake, Tito, George Steele. When he went into the office, George Steele became an agent. And, those were the guys that I could go to and ask questions.
Who was the booker when you were there?
Pat
Patterson?
Huh?
Okay. Now, okay, we're talking about Pat Patterson. Had you heard the locker room talk about him at that time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, everybody knew. Everybody in the business knew that Pat was gay.
Right.
There was no secret there. We knew Louis, who he was married to until Louis died for like 40 years.
40 years, yeah.
Yeah, they were together forever. And you knew them both. It wasn't an open story for the public, but in the back it was.
Was that something that the audience would care about back then?
Yeah.
Back then, yeah. You had characters that were the flamboyant type. Adrian Street, Gorgeous George was the first one. He was married. Everybody knew he was married.
Yeah.
They even had, before he passed away, his last gimmick, Adrian Adonis.
Mm-hmm. It would have hurt him. It would have hurt him if people thought for a fact or knew for a fact, yes, it would have hurt his drawing power because Pat was a tremendous worker. Pat knew how to get over.
Right.
I
remember Pat here. He did a stint in the AWA, and he was a tag champion with Ray the Crippler Stevens.
Yeah, and by then he was at the end of his career.
He was at the end of his career by then. I had never heard of him until he got to the AWA.
And he was still a better worker than 90% of the guys out there.
Yeah,
he was tremendous. It would have hurt his drawing power. It would have.
And then T-Bass wants to hear a Piper story.
Oh God, there's so many of those. Piper was a continual story. I don't know. The best one was when they left the rental car on the train tracks out in California. That one made the front page of the newspaper and everything.
He left a rented car on the train track?
It was San Jose, San Francisco, somewhere in the northern end of California. Him, Orton, and no, it was him and Orton. It was Morocco.
Don Morocco?
Yeah, they were all drunk, stoned, whatever else they were doing, and For whatever reason, they just left a rent-a-car on the railroad track, and they got run over. And they were already in the hotel, and the police came to arrest them. And Orton they couldn't take down, and Piper was. It was like a day and a half before Vince got them all out of jail and whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was constantly stuff like that with Piper. It was always, yeah, he didn't care.
No Piper. Roddy was Roddy.
He didn't care.
Yeah, Roddy was Roddy.
He was the same off and off the. He was the same outside the ring that he was in the ring, right?
Yeah, he wasn't quite as outrageous outside the ring, but yeah, he's definitely an adult ADHD. It was just a constant. There was always something happening with him. Yeah, I think that's the best story. That one, like I said, that made the front page of the paper. It was like an 80. I just got there, so it had to be 87.
Oh, that's before he went to Hollywood then.
Yeah, which is kind of surprising that but yeah, I'm trying to think. It had to have been 87.
Okay.
Yeah, he was one of the first wrestlers to do TV, wasn't he? Movies.
Our generation.
For our generation, yeah. He was, I mean, he had already been, Piper had already been kicked around. He was in the AWA, then he was down south.
Yeah.
He was a heel, then he was a face. He had a feud down there with, I think it was Arn Anderson, if I remember right.
I know he was in Georgia.
Ole. It was Ole. It was Ole Anderson.
Yeah, Ole loved him.
Yeah, it was Ole. And then when he got to, and this is when Vern started to take some of the top wrestlers from the territories and bring them in. He had Piper. And I'll tell you what, the reason I watched WWF, Roddy Piper, I couldn't wait.
You were alone. You were alone. He's one of those stories that people tend to forget from that time period. You know, like him and Orndorff carried the whole thing with Hogan for a year or more.
They were WrestleMania. They made WrestleMania.
Yeah, for a year or more. They were who Hogan worked with the guy here or worked with the guy there, but whenever it was time to draw, it was Piper and Orndorff for over a year.
Did you think the first WrestleMania in the Silverdome was going to be as big as it was?
You mean number 3?
Was that was the one that really.
That's the thing for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knew just how big it would be. I don't, you got the dream. I'm going to put it in this football stadium. I'm going to try to sell this football stadium out. And it depends on who you believe. It was 70 some odd thousand tickets sold, or it was 90,000 some odd tickets sold. Either way, it was a massive success. I don't think even Vince thought it would be that big.
I mean, for that era, they had 91, as so they said.
Yeah.
Vern tried to have one up here at the Metrodome, and he only sold like 50,000, if that. And it was
the first one. He was like 2 or 3 in the Metrodome, didn't he? And
yeah, that was. I forget what it was called, but
Russell Rock. I remember
Russell Rock. Yes,
I had forgot all about that.
He had and his biggest draw for that one was Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah.
In a tag match with the Freebirds of all people.
Yeah. Well,
but they only had like maybe 40,000 people.
Well, by then he was hurting.
Well, he had competition from Vince.
Vern was Vince's biggest competition, right?
Yeah.
For a short time.
Some have said that it was kind of when he took out the AWA, it was personal with Vince.
It was because Vince tried to buy Gagne out. I mean, Greg's admitted it. Vern admitted it.
Yeah.
They all admitted he tried to buy Gagne because Gagne had, like I've said it a couple times already, he had the biggest territory at the time. He ran in San Francisco, he ran Oakland, he ran Denver, he ran Phoenix, he ran the old territory where he's from. A couple other places in between, so he had a lot of the building connections. He had the TVs, and so in those days it was still syndicated. There was no cable TV, so he was.
Oh yeah, every Saturday morning at 11, Saturday and Sunday morning at 11 a.m. All Star Wrestling.
So if you're trying to go coast to coast, Vern was the perfect guy to get in with. In this case, buy him out, and Vern would do it. And so yeah, it became personal.
That's one of the stories I've heard all the time.
Oh, they all admitted it. Oh, down through the years, they've all admitted it. Yeah.
My question for you: do you have any interaction with one Eric Bischoff?
Not a lot. I worked for WCW for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
Bischoff only dealt with the top guys.
Okay.
Otherwise, guys like myself that were, the middle and underneath and doing the jobs and so forth, we would deal with the Terry Taylors and the Arn Andersons, the agents, or the Jody Hamiltons. Those are the guys we dealt with.
Okay.
I probably didn't have 2 conversations with Bischoff in the entire time.
We've all heard stories about Eric too. I mean,
I've always said Bischoff was great for TV, but he was horrible for wrestling.
Right.
I've always said that. He knew how to put a TV show together, but he had no clue what he was going to do to follow the next week. So he just had to try to top himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the reason that one year that he beat Vince in the ratings, sometimes unmerciful, how bad he would beat Vince in the ratings. That's why, because he could put a good TV together, and he kept getting some of that top talent in. And he had the deal with Japan. And so he had everything working for him, including Ted Turner's checkbook.
I think that was probably the biggest one. Was Ted Turner's checkbook.
Well, he was also the TV guy, not a wrestling guy as well.
Exactly. That's just what I'm getting at. And he could put together a good TV show. But after a while, what do you do? And he ran out of what do I do next points.
Well, they kind of jumped the shark with the muscle when they brought the monster shark in.
When they really killed themselves with Bischoff was when Bischoff allowed the NWO to just keep growing and splitting off and becoming all these other different factions and so forth. And it just got so confusing, people just said, "Oh, to hell with it."
Well, it's almost like I don't know if this is true or not, but to the person watching, it's almost like he gave Hogan, Hall, and Nash too much creative control, maybe?
He did.
Okay.
He did. That's for better or worse, and there's a lot of worse involved. That's one thing that you never had to worry about Vince. Everything began with him and it ended with him.
Which there was some good with that and some bad.
Exactly. That's what even with the bad things that have come out about him and so forth and so on. Business wise, if it didn't work, there was nobody to blame but him unless the guys just went out there and stunk it up.
Right.
It's his idea.
That was also the time that Steve Austin became pretty big too, right?
That
was also the time Steve Austin became pretty big too, when NWO was running.
Yeah, which is kind of makes my point about the NWO, and people just don't give it down because they can't follow what's going on with NWO. But here you got this one guy. His biggest thing was that he was the everyman fighting the boss.
Yeah.
People
well, the thing with Stone Cold was, now correct me if I'm wrong, Dusty. Stone Cold wanted to use that gimmick in WCW.
Something from what I've been told.
Yeah, and Eric shot it down.
Yeah, well, he was too busy with the NWO. He was too busy being involved with the NWO and getting his TV time with the NWO. And then I think he did the thing with Zbyszko, which means that he's still where he wants to be because Zbyszko is going to be doing the color commentary every week. There was no place for Austin at that time.
And his gimmick was he was a tag team with Brian Pillman at one time.
And they were great,
and they were good. But his gimmick was stunning Steve Austin.
Yeah, it was always a good hand.
He had the hair. He was basically like a Ric Flair.
You weren't breaking through that click.
No. Hey, no.
Hey. You weren't breaking. You weren't going to break through that click.
Wow.
As you said, Hogan came in. Bischoff gave him all that creative control. It was done. If you weren't in the click, you collect money, but you weren't getting a push. Nothing was getting pushed past the NWO at that time. And it worked for a while. That's just it. Like I said a minute ago, it worked so well that they just kept trying to top it.
You
can't. Eventually, you're just going to. It's like the monster that destroys itself.
Well, okay. So I'll ask you as a wrestler, what was the push with Goldberg then? He seemed kind of limited in the ring. He had like maybe one or two moves.
He was horrible.
Yeah.
But people bought him. And that's one thing that Bischoff did, or whoever was involved with the Goldberg push, they actually listened to the people. And people loved Goldberg. They didn't care that he knew two moves in one hold.
He did the spear. That was it. That when he did the spear, the place erupted.
Exactly. And the only problem when you build a monster, and this has been since the days of before TV ever started, as far as wrestling goes, you build the monster, but once you beat the monster, there's no going back. You can't, unless you're willing to turn the monster heel. And there was no turning to Goldberg heel.
Right. They tried and it didn't. It failed.
No, it wouldn't work. It was not going to work.
Oh, kind of the issue they had, same issue they had with Ultimate Warrior. From what you're saying, he was not very good, but he was so big merchandise wise.
In merchandise, yeah, I was there then, so I know he wasn't selling tickets. They put
Was he really? Was he that bad of a worker though?
Yeah, he was horrible.
Wow,
he was horrible. I mean, I'm not trying to speak ill of the dead. He was just a horrible worker, but he didn't have to be a worker. Vince, with the name is all you need to know as far as the way Vince viewed him, the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, that's all you need to know. Vince was not going to let him fail.
Here's my thing though. He had started in a territory. He was in WCCW at one time.
Yeah, I remember when he started.
He was the Dingo Warrior, and you would think that somebody would have worked with him all his way up to WWF. They just slide him through, or was it the appearance?
Pretty much. I mean, he and Sting broke in with two other guys out in California, and the guy that trained them just took the money and ran.
Okay.
Sent them to Memphis. They worked in Memphis for a little bit. They worked for Watts a little bit.
That's when they were the Blade Runners, right?
Right. Warrior leaves Watts because he has a falling out with Watts. He ends up in Dallas. Nobody's taught him anything because he's got such a look. We just, we feed people to him. Just feed people to him. And then when Vince finally saw him, that was what Vince would have been if his dad had ever let him be a wrestler. That was what Vince wanted it to be.
The big jacked up wrestler.
He wanted to be Helwig. And so since by now he's making so much money, it made no sense for him to try to get in the ring. But he's got the visual of what Vince always wanted to be. And so from that point forward, Warrior was on the job training.
Okay.
It was you learn as you go. He could perform. When he was in there with a guy like Rude, when he was in there with a guy like Hogan, he could. He just didn't have to.
Right.
And you knew it.
So. Hey, Kesh, that was a good question by T-Bass.
What's that?
Did you try this one or?
That's the one I'm at.
Jobber is kind of an insult because people have turned it into an insult. Really, they have. I don't care anymore. I'm not in the business anymore. I don't care. Because we're all wrestlers. It's just some guys are stars and some guys aren't.
Right.
The biggest movie in the world doesn't work without a supporting cast. Best TV shows that we watch, whether your favorite one's a comedy or a drama or a procedural or whatever it may be, it doesn't work without a supporting cast. It can't. And that's what we did. We were the guys. We laid the foundation so the main eventers could go out there and do whatever it was they did. Mm-hmm. But we were all wrestlers. The name, like I said, the name just became derogatory. Sports when I was a kid, baseball and wrestling. I played enough football to realize I was a good baseball player. I'm not gonna lie. I tried to play football. I enjoyed playing football, but I was
Dusty. I talked about this. It's between Dusty and I, as I actually like the contact in football. Whereas
it wasn't the contact. I was kind of. I'm not really fast. I'm not really fast. I never was, even when I was a kid. And I was not big enough to be slow, and I was too little to be slow. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
When it comes to football,
back then with the way they were with football back then. Yeah.
As slow as I was too small to play the line. And so, I would have made a linebacker or a defensive back, but I was too slow.
How tall are you?
But you had the heart.
Yeah, I tried. Baseball was my sport. I enjoyed baseball.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I did pretty good at baseball. Before all the back surgeries and everything, I was 5'11". I have no idea what I am now.
Okay.
I refuse to go and check anymore, but I know little bit. I know I'm a little bit smaller than I was when I was before the back surgeries and stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
And I never crossed paths. Yeah, I met McMichael. McMichael was one of those. He's another one of those wild men. If you didn't take him too seriously, he was a great guy. But he was. There was a lot of those old NFL players. They were just a little bit out there. I think maybe you had to be to play, especially in those days when there were fewer rules and people were,
Well, that Bears team that he played on.
That was a whole list of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, but I didn't know him. I crossed paths with him a few times. He seemed to be a nice guy to me.
Did you cross paths with Kevin Green at all?
No, I never met Kevin Green.
Okay.
Never did. He pretty much stayed close to Charlotte. When I was working for WCW, I did a lot of things closer to this direction, Texas, all the way to Florida, Atlanta, but I didn't go up into the Carolinas much with him. I really didn't.
So now here's my question for you, since you are Texas. The Von Erichs, how well did you know them?
I knew all of them.
Okay.
David, I didn't know well. He died when I had been in business about a year and a half. So I didn't know him well.
Right.
Mike, I didn't know well either, because when I finally went to work in Dallas, that's when he was still sick from the toxic shock and so on. And then that's when he killed himself.
Right.
But Kevin and Kerry, I knew them well. Lance was my buddy. Lance, that's kind of funny, but it kind of makes sense too. The one that wasn't in the clique, so to speak, that was my buddy. Yeah, but I knew
Kevin's the only one still alive, right?
Yeah, Lance is around. Lance spends his time between Baja and South Africa.
Oh, he's just out there living a life.
He works for a timeshare corporation.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how much money he has invested either, because at one time he had 2 or 3 gyms over in Africa, and he sold them. I don't know if he still has the money from them. The point being is he's always taken care of Lance. He's always made sure he's got an income. He does well.
And T-Bass also wants to know CST is a thing with wrestlers as well as football players.
Yeah, you see it.
CTE?
I'm not around the guys anymore, but the handful of times I see someone or I talk to somebody, you see it. You see the bike stairs and stuff.
I got a question for you. Explain the chair shot to where
you get hit.
It's real.
Yeah, you get hit. The only thing that keeps you from killing you is the seat of the chair. It's got a little bit of give, but not a lot. You get hit.
Okay, them chairs, when they take those chair shots and they put it around the neck, isn't that risky?
I imagine so.
I've seen that a bunch. They've used. I saw it happened to Shawn Michaels years ago.
Yeah,
I've done they're doing it again. I'm just kind of like,
I've been on both ends of it.
Right.
Around the neck or around the arm, around the leg. I've done both. I've taken and received. You don't think about it in the moment. You don't, because I don't know about today, but when I was around, most guys, if they were doing something like that, they knew what they were doing.
Right.
So it would have had to have been a problem if somebody got hurt.
So, okay, did you ever have to do the, as they say, the crimson mask?
A few times, but I was never in positions, to do it. I mean, and then when I was, I always fight it or refuse to do it until this is the right time. And then I did. Then when I got on the independent scene, I just wouldn't do it.
Okay.
What are we coming back to? Why are we coming back? Why am I going to get color for 150 people, 250 people, 300 people? I may never be back. I'm not doing that.
I think growing up, I used to read all the wrestling magazines. The one that was notorious for that was Dusty Rhodes.
There was a few. He was, Abdullah, obviously.
Abdullah the Butcher, yes.
Carlos, Flair himself. There's a list of guys like that. They just, to them, color adds to everything.
Adds to the story.
Yeah, so they
That's insane.
and in reality, with the list of guys we're talking about, they were coming back. There was something to come back to. They were trying to build something. Like on Flair's case, or Harley wasn't bad about it, but Harley would use, he would get color too. They've got the champ beat. The champ's about, he's beaten bloody, but he still walks out with the belt. There's part of your return right there. And that's what they were doing. And then those guys said, okay, go for it. You're making six figures in a day where most people aren't. So
my uncle told a story years ago. He went to a wrestling match over here in Minneapolis, the old AWA. And the main event was the Crusher and Dick the Bruiser against the tag team of Harley Race and I forget, Pretty Boy Larry Hennig.
Larry Hennig.
Mm-hmm. And he said that was probably the most blood he's ever seen in a wrestling match.
Was it Chicago?
It was in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis?
Yeah.
Chicago was known for the fans to chant "We want blood" all the way back in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. And this is my uncle saw this match in probably the 60s.
If it was those two, it had to be around 68 or so.
Yeah. Right. And he said that was probably since even on his passing day, he said he had never seen so much blood.
That surprises me in Minneapolis. If he had told me Chicago, I'd have just like, that was.
Well, the crazy thing was the Crusher brought out a sledgehammer.
Yeah, he did. Here comes the judge thing. I remember that.
Yeah.
As a kid, here comes the judge, and that was his gavel.
Yeah, and he had the sledgehammer, and and I think back to that, I'm like, okay, so that's where Triple H got the idea.
Probably.
So we all know, as I told them, you've played Doink. But there's a question of which one. Well, we all know you weren't the first, but which one were you in line?
Kern came along after that.
So were you like number 3?
I never did it on TV. That was either Kern, usually Matt, or Kern, or Ray Apollo.
Which Kern? Steve Kern? Was it really Steve Kern?
You remember when the one clown came out from under the mat, and you had the two, and they were doing the thing in the ring?
Yeah,
that was Kern.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the very end of my time there were times where we need the clown in the building. Yeah. What's that mean? It's, the outfits on the truck get painted. Right. I might not even work. I might just do a thing where I ran in and hit somebody with the water or whatever. But I never did TV. It was about the only thing he had drawing money there for a little while was Doink. And that was off his merchandising. So there were nights where if he was running 2 and 3 towns, there would be 2 or 3 clowns in 2 or 3 towns.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, what number? I don't know. So the only 3 that really anybody knows from that TV would have been Matt Bourne, Steve, or Ray Apollo. Yeah.
So my question is, I got a question. Was there any wrestler when you were in WWF that you tried to avoid at all cost? You wanted to do with
Dynamite. I stay away from that. Dynamite was just trouble in and out of the ring. I don't like working with the Warrior either. I mean, I did. I got along with him outside the ring, but in the ring, I was like, "Oh, who did I make mad tonight? What have I done now?"
So was Dynamite Kid really that off the chain that he was just real? You just never knew who you were getting.
He had a little man syndrome.
Okay,
he had to be the toughest guy in the building, and he was just not a good human.
Wow,
as simple as that. Most of the guys that were around in those days, even if they had problems, had issues, or whatever, they were business.
Mm-hmm.
And Dynamite wasn't even that guy.
So, on the flip side, let's talk about a really, really good human. That everything everybody says about this guy is true, and that's Andre.
I always liked Andre. Andre, when you hear somebody say if Andre didn't like you, he didn't like you, and if he did, he did, and there was no in between, they're not lying. 100%. That was Andre's. He liked you. He didn't like you. If he liked you, you could do no wrong unless you just did something really, you lied to him or did something really stupid.
Right.
If he didn't like you, do the same thing. There was nothing you were going to do to get him to like you.
Was he? Whose idea was it to turn him heel? Was that Vince or his?
I don't know for sure. I think it was Vince's. I don't know that Andre would have come up with the idea.
Right.
And the drinking stories about him are true as well.
Oh, they're all true.
Oh, he could put them away.
Oh, no. I was,
was it like a case a night or something like that?
Well, yeah, or 2 or 3 bottles of vodka, or you'd have a bottle of wine to warm up, and then you'd have 2 or 3 bottles when you get done working, and then go to drinking beer, things like that. The only time I'd heard all the stories, and one night in Albany, I decided I was going to see if the stories were true.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in Albany, New York. I woke up on the luggage cart in my room. I still don't know who put me there. I don't know if it was Andre or I think DiBiase was with us.
Probably carried you guys under each arm.
I don't know who put me, but they got me in. I woke up. I was literally in the little hallway when you front, your door in your room. That little hallway. I was on the luggage cart just sitting. That's the last time I tried to keep up with Andre.
So another thing Tony told me he wanted to ask you about, I think he forgot, was what is Vince like you've told me before that you really don't dislike Vince.
I don't have anything against
I think he gets a bad rap more than what he should.
I don't know. I mean, business wise, yes, 100%. Personally, some of the things I've heard recently, I'm like, oh, he earned every bit of that. But business wise, yeah, he gets a bad rap because he didn't do anything that the other guys wouldn't have done and didn't try to do. All the guys that run them out, we talk about Vern, Ole, Crockett. You go down the list, and all the guys that talked about him.
Bill Watts,
they all tried to do exactly the same thing and would have done it sooner if they could have figured out a way. So, I mean, at that part, I'm like, it's just sour grapes.
Yeah.
As I said a minute ago, when it came time to make a decision, you may deal with Pat 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But Vince knew what Pat was doing, meaning that it all still ended with Vince.
Vince was the final say.
Right. And some people hated that because, one man runs it all. For the longest time, business-wise, if he wasn't proven that that's what works, guys like Bischoff, who we talked about a minute ago, or the committee when WCW was bought out by Turner and whatever, it was proven that doesn't work. So it's one of those things that's for me, it's kind of depressing because he always treated me well. I didn't have any reason for being there. There was absolutely no reason to bring me in. I didn't have family. I didn't have connections. I had nothing. I had nothing physically. I didn't look like everything he wanted. Right. And he brought me in and kept me around for a good while. There were times I made more money than others, but I was still making it. And yeah.
Okay, so here's a question I wanted to ask somebody. Guys, you had still talked to wrestlers even after you had left.
For a little bit. Recently, in the last 5-10 years, I haven't talked to too many. But,
Okay, well, this is I'm going back to the 90s here. Was the Montreal screw job was it real or was it planned? What was the story with it?
I've always said that the only one that wasn't in on the job was Brett.
Okay.
Because there's no way they pulled it off without everybody being in on it together. There's no way.
Right.
It's not absolutely impossible. I've always said that Brett didn't know.
So that reaction we saw in Wrestling with Shadows was real?
I think so. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. But
because if you listen to, Jim Cornette,
mm-hmm.
if you listen to him tell the story, they had talked about it, and Brett was willing to put Sean over, but Sean wasn't willing to put Brett over.
And the thing was, Brett wasn't going to do it in Canada.
He wasn't going to do the job. Yeah, exactly.
In Canada,
he wasn't going to do the job.
Those two truly did not like each other, right?
No, at that time they didn't.
Well, they were both money guys.
They were fighting for the same spot.
They were fighting for the same spot.
And this is when Sean was at his worst. As far as just dealing with him as a person. Yeah, even Sean tells you that. He'll tell you that. He doesn't try to hide it.
He doesn't hide it. He will.
He'll tell you
He will tell you that.
Like
He'll
it's
tell
just
you
like a big ego, or
that. He was on the pills.
He was really bad drugs.
Yeah, he's on
Really
the pills.
bad. And he drank too. Matter of fact, that ties into what's going on now with The Rock. Years ago, Rock's grandmother she ran an organization, wrestling
Yeah,
organization.
I worked for her.
Did you work for her?
Mhm.
Okay. Sean was down there. I guess Sean was just really, really disrespectful to her. And and that was when, Sean was going through his stuff. Well, Rock remembers that.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
So there's still, these guys may be cordial to their faces and civil, but I think there's some.
Well, a lot of the guys, if they've made enough money, they understand business is business 1st.
Mhm.
And they'll take care of business first. I've known guys that completely detested each other that still go out there and
Right.
perform. I've known tag teams who couldn't stand to be in the same car together, but they still go out there and perform. So it's business. But back to the original situation, I think Brett got smartened up quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But once he got smartened up, he can't go back. Not anytime soon. He's got that deal in Atlanta. And a smart man, which Brett is, will keep the work going, because when his deal in Atlanta's up, he puts himself in a bidding war position. Didn't work. Goldberg kicked him in the head and it was over for Brett. But by now,
I remember when that happened. I'm just like, oh my God.
But by now you can't, if you're Brett, you can't let the work go. You can't. Or you destroy everything that you've tried to create for yourself.
So we'll get a couple of questions from TB. The toughest bump, highest risk to get injuries, like what move?
There's some things today that I wouldn't even attempt. But when I was around, I never took the Road Warriors finish. That's the only time I ever.
Well, you never did that one, huh?
That's the only time I ever refused to do anything in the entire 6 years I was there. That's one of the few times I've ever refused to do a finish, period. You've taken care of me, but you're not going to. I break my neck on that. You're not. I know you're not taking care of me, so I'm not doing it. And they're like, well, okay, no, that's why we asked you. I'm like, thank you.
Were they easy to work with?
Yeah, they were easy to work with, but their finish was brutal.
Okay.
Yeah. By the time I was around them, I remember when they broke in. I'm like, oh dear God, I'm glad I'm nowhere near it. Yeah. But anyway, tough to take.
Yeah. You got a question about Son?
Every time I left my feet, I hated it. The Frankensteiner was rough because Steiner himself's just so big.
Right.
That was hard for me. Other people took it a breeze. It was like nothing.
Because when they jump off the top rope, they're not really landing on you. They're kind of landing next.
All of them are. I mean, there's no way for him to completely land on you. Kidman nearly killed me one day when he was doing whatever that spinning thing he did off the top rope and cut me both knees in the side of the head. I thought he'd killed me.
And he was a big guy doing that.
Kidman wasn't a big guy. Kidman was the smaller guy.
Or not Kidman. I was thinking of somebody else. Okay.
Yeah, he did. He did that spinning whatever something.
Was it Jimmy Snookerfly who did like the flip off the rope?
He did the flip off the top rope, but it was a belly to belly, like a belly spin.
He would flint. He would spin.
Yeah, he would spin.
And like instead of just doing a splash on you.
He did it. He did it in a cage match on Don Morocco, and that was like.
Snooker did a regular splash. Kidman did this thing where he would do a spin. He would do
a
in the air, and there's no way to catch himself when he's landed. And like the first time he ever did it to me, he got me in the arm. Like my arm was just as black as it is now with my shirt on, and I'm like. And sometime right after that, he landed on Chavo Jr. and knocked Chavo Jr. completely out because he hit him inside the head with both knees.
Oh.
And then I'm working with him again, and I'm like, can we do anything? But they call it the shooting star. That's what they call
The
it.
shooting star, yes.
Yeah, can we do anything besides the shooting star? I mean, he's knocked Chavo out. My arm, I couldn't use it for a week. Oh, no, but it's his finish. And I'm like, so anyway, when I did it, he caught me with both knees right in the jaw, and I thought he broke my jaw. Kidman was a good worker, but that finish was brutal. I think that was the worst one. It really, truthfully was. Most of the guys weren't trying to kill you then. It wasn't like we got to have a near death in the ring in order to beat somebody in those days.
They actually, you guys watched one another. You
We had to.
were careful with one another. Yeah.
You know, you're working 200-300 days a year. So you had to.
You guys traveled in groups, right? There was like 3 or 4 of you that traveled together, right?
2, 3, 4. You know, some guys travel by themselves. But yeah, you tried to have travel guys that would split expenses and make it a little easier, split the driving and that sort of thing. You tried.
And to let everybody know that you paid for that out of your own pockets, right? The travel.
Yeah. The flights are taken care of, but you know, however you get to the building from there is on you.
Yep.
T-Bass wants to know about Sunny.
I've only met her a handful of times. She came along, you know, I was like I said, I was gone in 93, and she came along whenever Cornette came in. You know, that was 95.
Cornette worked with them both in Ohio Valley, her and Chris Candido.
What's the reason why a lot of people don't like Cornette? Is it just because he doesn't his stories aren't true? Or?
He's outspoken.
He's honest. That's his problem. One problem with Cornette is he's liberal.
That's his biggest one.
And he's not bashful about saying I'm liberal and I don't like the MAGA. And wrestling fans are MAGA. Not all of them, but
not all of them.
Huge number are. And
depending on which part of the country, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then the other thing that gets Cornette in trouble today, even if if the wrestling fans don't give a damn about politics, he's not a fan of the new guys.
He does not like. He rips on the AEW guys. He calls them I think he calls the Young Bucks the Cucamonga Twins.
Oh, well, I try watching it. I can't.
He's got a name for Kenny Omega and all those guys. He really doesn't like that style of wrestling.
Well, so more of a women's dominated now, though, isn't it?
The women are AEW. The women are last time I looked, that's all they had worth watching, truthfully, because they actually go without. Like everybody talks about how great Omega is, and I watch Omega hit his own finish like 6 times.
And here's a problem with that. A lot of those younger guys with the finishes they do, yeah, it's really out there, but they kill themselves. They get hurt.
Yeah.
And they're on the shelf for 6 months out of the year.
Well, exactly. If you've got a guaranteed deal, that's great. But the thing is, the good Lord willing, you're going to get old.
Yeah, and Kenny's damn near 40.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't work like that, and I've had a hip replaced, I've had a knee replaced, I've had 2 back surgeries. August, I'm going to have 2 vertebrae replaced in my neck. You know, and I didn't work like that.
Right.
I can imagine what they're doing to themselves, and for what?
Yeah, they don't have the work schedule WWE does because WWE doesn't do house shows.
No, even WWE doesn't have the same house show schedule as they did either.
No, they cut it down 2 or 3 nights,
which is okay. I mean, it's especially if you've got guaranteed money and you take it a little bit easier on your talent, and I'm all for that. I'm 100% for that. I don't have to know anybody. I don't have to be attached to anybody. It's just I know what I went through. If I wanted to make money, I had to be there.
Yeah.
And because we were getting paid on the house, we weren't getting paid a guaranteed deal. And it didn't matter if it was him. It didn't matter if I was in Florida, Puerto Rico, here in Texas, Kansas City. It didn't matter if you weren't there, you didn't get paid.
So will you ever? I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Did you ever go to Japan?
Yeah, I've been 5 times.
Okay. It's crazy over there, isn't it?
It is. It's rough. I don't know what Baba's office is now. I don't know who runs Baba's office today. I think Buddha does.
Buddha's running it, I believe.
I believe so too. That's the last I heard, and that's been a couple of years now, at least a couple of years. But anyway, Baba's office wasn't that crazy. But Inoki's office, they would do some absolutely insane, and not flip flop fly insane type stuff, but just beat each other up insane. And I don't know why. I don't know. I didn't work for either one of those offices. I worked for Kendo Nagasaki.
Okay.
And then I worked for the military on the military bases, our military bases over there. So when we were working on the bases, it was all Americans. But the times that I was with Kendo, it was stiff, it was rough, but it wasn't like what I would watch some of these guys do with Inoki. It wasn't like that. It wasn't Hanson taking people out of their boots or Masawa dropping people on their heads and stuff. They weren't that dangerous.
Hanson was over there quite a bit, wasn't he?
Hanson was like a god over there for a while.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Catch.
No, I was saying,
yeah.
And finally, I know. Well, this is my last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
We just lost to Iron Sheik. What was he like to work with? And
He was, as far as work with, it was easy. He can only do so many things. And then he hits you in the clutch and you're done. Or you catch your gear finish and you're done. I mean, he's only going to do so many things. But what you saw, he's not one of those. Whatever you saw, that's what the Sheik was. There was no work. It was just amplified a little bit for the camera. That was the Iron Sheik. The accent and
he trained in Vern Gagne up here in Minneapolis.
Yep.
He was, matter of fact, he was same place as Greg Gagne, Jim Brunzell, and Ric Flair.
That old barn Gagne had out there on his property. Yeah, I've heard more than one story about that old barn. Patera and I used to be pretty tight, and Patera would tell me stories about that barn, and I'm like, I had it easy. I thought I had it bad. I hear about that barn, and then Brunzell confirmed it a couple of times. He's like, oh yeah, you get one light, and that was your heat. There's snow blowing in through the cracks or whatever. So Gagne was rough on his boys. But you look at the list of talent he put out there. But
put it this way: if you ever watch Rocky 3, I think it was what Rocky was it where he trained against the Russian?
Yeah. That was Gagne's barn. Yeah,
that was Gagne's barn.
Yeah. Easily, just from the descriptions I've heard. Sheik was triple tough, until the ankles and the knees went out.
He was like pretty much almost unwalkable towards the end of his life.
Yeah, his feet were sideways and his knees were in.
Yeah. Many of them end up in wheelchairs.
I understand why.
Yeah.
I completely understand why.
I remember seeing Harley after he was done wrestling.
He was in a hover out there at the end.
Like knobby knees, and he just could not. It was really heartbreaking, actually.
Yeah, he ended up in a hover around.
Romantic.
And that's another guy that probably
Wrong sheet.
7,000-8,000 matches. How many of them were hour long?
Yeah.
And those rings in the 50s, and he started in the 60s, but 50s to their mid 70s, some of those rings were just like the floor. It's just like being on a tile floor or the concrete, some of those rings. St. Louis, Toronto, Dallas. Some of them were just horrible. And he was out there doing things other guys weren't doing. So I was not surprised to see Harley in the hover around at the end. That one didn't shock me at all.
And you've written 2 books or 3 books?
Just the one.
Just the one?
Just the one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on Journal of a Journeyman. As far as, and I always have a few. If somebody wanted to, I could look them up. But yeah, I wrote that. It's just the story of a guy who probably had no business being in wrestling in the first place. Certainly didn't have any business being in all the places I went.
Right.
Doing all the things that I did because, as I said, I had no family. I had, we all get breaks. We all get opportunities. We all get chances. But I had to make mine. And that sort of thing. And never a top guy, so it's a view of what it's like to survive but not be the top guy.
Right.
All right. Well, was there any last thoughts, Tony?
No, this is really insightful. I was thank you for coming on. You answered you answered a lot of my questions.
Oh, good.
I get this anytime I want it, Tony.
Yeah, okay, rub it in, Catch.
Yeah.
Fine, I'll pick your brain when it comes to pro wrestling, so you can
All right,
go
you
back
do that.
to Dusty and pick his brain.
Dude, that's good. Yeah, you brought up memories with Gagne and the Sheik, and because like people don't realize just how tough the Sheik was. You know, I'm sitting there thinking about it. The story about him being a bodyguard for Shaw and all that. That's real.
Okay.
Working in, an Olympic wrestler. That's real.
Yeah.
That's not a story behind the scene. We're going to create a story. No, that was one time we were. Where's Arizona State? Is it in Tempe or is it in
Tempe, I believe.
It's in Tempe.
It's in Tempe. One's in Tempe, Arizona's, and one's Tempe, and the other's in Tucson. Anyway.
Arizona's in Tucson. Tempe is.
Tempe and Tucson are both in Arizona.
Yeah,
No,
Tempe is Sun Devils.
State. I can't remember which
Sun
college.
Devil Stadium is, I believe,
Yeah, Tempe is the Sun Devils because that's where the Cardinals used to play.
Okay, so wherever Arizona, whichever town Arizona State's in.
Yeah.
All right, we're at the arena. I'll tell this story on the Sheik. Sheik could barely walk by now. He was doing the Mustafa thing by now. And he and I were sitting there playing cards, and he sees a couple of the amateurs from Arizona State. And Arizona State, but at this point in time in history, the early 90s, they have one of the best teams in the nation, right?
Yeah.
He sees the amateurs walking, and they're going into the big training room down the hall from where we're at. And he's like, "Oh, Daddy, let me go. I'll be back." So I go do my thing, and he comes back. "Anybody look for Shiki? I'm training." And he went, barely could walk, and trained with the entire wrestling team from Arizona State. And some of those boys looked like they had been put through the ringer. And he's just dripping sweat. He's like, "It's excellent, Daddy. Excellent." And I'm like, "My God, he just went through half the team, or at least the upper size guys,
right,
like 80 pounds on up. He went through all of them. Yeah. Shiki, show them. Shiki, I'm like, and he meant it too. Those kids could hurt you. It didn't bother him at all.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we talked about the Owen Hart before.
Owen. I remember watching the Owen Hart, and I was.
Owen, I liked Owen.
Yeah.
That was one of those things. I was driving home when that happened. I was on Interstate 10. I was coming home. I'd been working in New Orleans that week.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a big deal that the news broke through just normal radio, the songs or whatever, and there's been an accident. We'll get back to you, the emergency type thing. And I remember that.
It was.
I remember the announcers actually saying this is not part of the thing.
You knew it wasn't bad. You knew it was bad when Jerry Lawler came back on camera and he said, "This is not good."
I've never seen it. I've never wanted to see it.
Yeah,
it was. You knew something was up, and then they announced that he had died.
Yeah.
Which many wrestlers were like, "Why didn't they just stop the card when that happened?"
Hindsight being what it is, I agree. In the moment, how many people are going to start raising hell with their servers, cable servers? It was all pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Right? And how much of a situation are you going to create with all the people at home that don't believe you when you say this is bad?
Well, just with the people that were there, and I forget what city they were in when it happened.
Kansas City.
What city?
Kansas City.
They were in Kansas City. Who's to know you wouldn't get a riot?
That's my point, because they just don't believe that this is
right. I remember I attended a wrestling match here the day that Eddie Guerrero died.
Yeah.
And we get to the arena and everybody's like, "What's going on?" There were people that were there, and I told them Eddie Guerrero, he died today. And they're like, "Oh, that's kayfabe. That's not real. It's all fake." I'm like, "No, he's dead, dude."
Well, Hector called me. I was taking a nap in the building. Again, I was in the New Orleans area, and it was an afternoon show, and I had some guys. I'd driven that night, and blah blah blah, and I had just found me a spot to lay down, and Hector called me, And he's like, "Do you know how to find Chavo?" I'm like, "Chavo's not one of my favorite people."
Right.
I love you, but Chavo's not on my list, right?
Mhm.
What do you need? Well, I'll see what I can help you with, because he was living in Corpus at the time.
Mhm.
And he said they just found Eddie's body. You know. So I've called some people in Corpus and located Chavo and told him he needed to call his brother. But yeah, I remember that one too. That was another one of those. You're like, what the?
Yeah.
If hadn't been a Hector, I'd have thought it was a rib. Because Hector at that point in time had called me like 3 times in my life, and all of a sudden he's calling me. But yeah, I remember that. Because like you just said, people, they don't believe it. And
They don't believe it.
You've got Owen laying there lifeless, and there's no telling what would have happened in that arena. There's no telling what. So in the moment, I'm not trying to justify anything, because I might have, had I been involved, I might have been one of the guys too that says, just stop it.
Right.
To hell with it. But, looking back, yeah, why didn't he just stop it?
But like we always say, hindsight's 20/20.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know this was a treat for you, Tony.
This was.
Yeah.
I love this.
Glad. Good to hear.
I'm one of those wrestling geeks. I'm like, I love football, love my metal music, and I love wrestling.
Yeah.
So it's like when somebody tells me, how can you watch that garbage? I'm like, how can you watch reality TV when it's staged?
Yeah.
This is,
Same thing. I don't watch the product anymore. I honestly don't, because I don't understand what they're doing. I honestly don't. I see them nearly kill themselves in a match, and then they do nothing to leave. I don't, when I was growing up and watching, and when I was in the business and trying, enjoying it, whatever, I enjoyed the story, the angle. We call it an angle. We didn't call it a story, but I enjoyed that. And to me, that's what brought you back. And now there's none of that. And I'm like, well, what are they doing? And so I don't even try. I really don't. Every once in a while, the wife or my little one, they'll want to watch a little something, and I'm like,
I think with the younger wrestlers now, it's all about the high flyer moves.
Working like a video game.
They're like a video game, and I watch it. I do watch AEW. I watch them both. With AEW, I'm kind of like, so one of these guys haven't killed themselves already.
You know what little bit I've seen, I'm the same way. I don't know how. Like I said earlier, I don't feel sorry for them, because I know what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Another 20 years will be like me or worse.
Rey Mysterio, Rey Mysterio Jr. were doing that before these people were even thinking about doing all that athletic stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there's a wrestler now that's saying he has to retire. That's AJ Styles.
I don't doubt it. AJ's been around about 20, 25 years too now.
Yeah, and he's like, he can't do it anymore.
You can't.
He just
you
can't.
get to a point that it's just done. And you don't want to, because it's been your life and it's who you are, and you don't want to quit. He's in a good position, but for most of us, you're not in that same position.
No,
the money's not what it was, and the travel's harder, and the injuries don't heal.
AJ would be considered a headliner, right?
Oh yeah, easily.
Okay,
Easily. And I mean, he's had guaranteed money for a good part of his career.
Right.
So
he's been successful everywhere he's went. So
one way,
nothing much you can do, nothing more you can do.
Yeah, so that's exactly. So in one way, it's easier for him to walk away, because he's realized everything. But in another part of the psyche that creates whatever we are, the ego, whatever it is, you don't want to let go.
Right.
It is a rush to go out there and manipulate crowds, and it's fun. It really is. And like I say, but we all have an expiration date that the body just won't anymore. And AJ, some of the things I've seen AJ do, and just in clips, and I haven't even seen full matches.
And AJ did them before a lot of these younger guys did.
Yeah, I don't know how he's still going. He's got to be 50.
45, 46.
I don't know. Okay, I'll take your word. Yeah, he could be, because, in 25 years, he started when he was 18, 19. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I think he's almost 50, put it that way.
I was going to say he's got to be. He's got to be pushing it. Yeah.
He's pretty close.
That's when I quit, was 47.
47 was it for you?
Yeah. I had about 4,000 matches by that time, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't. Yeah.
You can definitely see the effects.
Well, you saw it if you watched WrestleMania when the Undertaker come back. You could tell he's just beat the hell.
Yeah, the one I saw that we were talking about the dark side of the ring. I saw Beefcakes the other day, and I was just shocked at how broken Beefcake is, physically broken. He can't stand up. He can't walk.
So here's my question for you. You're from that era. How much of that is steroids?
I don't know, because like I mentioned my surgeries, and I wasn't on them. No matter what you do, you're abusing your body.
Yeah.
Even if you're taking care of each other, you're still abusing it. And like in my case, a lot of it now is just cumulative. I may not have torn anything up so bad at that time that it had to be fixed, but a little ding and another little ding and then another little ding and then another little, and
they all add up.
They all add up.
That
arthritis starts, and like when my back stenosis starts because of the shrinkage. I'm not alone. I see it. I see some of these guys.
Well, here's one. We talk about wrestlers that are in really bad shape. Lex Luger.
Well, his spine exploded.
Yeah. I heard
that. Steiner or Rick?
I think it was it Scott?
No, he was on an airplane with Rick.
Okay.
The last time I ever saw Rick, we were riding together, and I asked him, I said, what happened to Luke? Because it was just when Luger first was paralyzed, people didn't know if he's going to live or die or whatever, like a week after, right? And he said, we were on a plane headed wherever they were headed. I mean, they may have been headed home, but wherever they were going, like midway through the flight, he said, Luger just looked at him, turned real pale, and said, something's wrong. And his spine literally exploded.
Ooh.
And that's what caused everything for him from that point forward.
Damn.
Yeah. So, even when you got him off the plane and got him to the hospital or whatever, there's shards in his spine that are in the nerves and that sort of thing. And it just,
Wow.
Yeah, I remember that one vividly because, like I said, I was riding with Steiner like a week after that happened. We were up wherever we were at, Nebraska or somewhere. Yeah. He told me, he said, he's just sitting on the plane talking to him, and he just looked at me and he was like, I think he's dying. I think Luger's dying on me.
Damn. Yeah. That's why I don't fly.
That's what happened there.
Yeah. And I've got scoliosis, so I've got a rod on my back.
I know exactly what you got going on there.
Yeah. And so, and then when you change altitude and all that, that can cause problems with your body if you're not used to it. So, I'll take the bus.
Look, the whole list of them. We do it to ourselves. We do.
Well, you love it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like with football players. You love the sport. Anything you love, you put your all into it.
Yeah, and you couldn't tell us any different when we were doing it.
Right.
Yeah. People told us that we were done to do it, but we did it anyway.
We were younger. I mean, that's one of those things. When we're younger, we're invincible.
Exactly.
Now we're like, what the hell were we thinking?
Exactly.
It's just life.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, we've gone a little past an hour. Appreciate all your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
We can do it again sometime.
Good. Sounds good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Like I said, I get the. You don't want to know Dusty's favorite. We're not going to talk NFL because it'll change the temperature in the room really quick.
He's probably a Cowboys fan.
I can't help it. You guys don't like a real team like the Cowboys. They weren't raised right.
You sure about that?
He hates the Cowboys more than I do, Dusty.
I wake up every morning next to a Steelers fan, so
I got more respect for the Steelers fan.
Ow, I hurt.
Well, put it this way, I will wear a Randy White jersey because I thought he was one of the best to ever play the game.
He was,
and it had Too Tall Jones.
Yeah.
You can keep that Drew Pearson and wipe your ass with it. I don't care.
Yes, the Hail Mary. I understand.
Yep.
All right.
Well,
But thanks again, Dusty, for
speaking of NFL, we didn't do last week because if you guys follow me on Twitter, my profile pic is my doggy Pepsi. I lost him last week, so that's why I didn't do any shows last week. But we are doing our typical Vikings Vintage Show Wednesday, and then we're doing our free for all Friday.
Do you have a team?
Oh, geez, here we go.
Wait, when we lose, it's the ref's fault, right, Dusty?
All right.
Here come the ring jokes.
he just does.
I mean, they haven't been relevant since what? Cosby was on TV, but hey.
All right. Well, Dusty, I appreciate you coming.
All right,
on.
guys.
Thank you so much, Dusty.
Yeah.
All right. You guys take care.
Take care, Dusty.
All right. Bye.
That
was fun.
That was a pleasure for you.
That was a pleasure. Yeah, he answered a lot of questions.
There's plenty of stories that he did not say that I get that are just some of the stories he has are just awesome. So
hey, your mom asked
you enjoyed it. So
yeah. That was he answered a lot of questions that I had my.
Well, I told you he would answer a lot of them.
Yeah, he did.
And what he didn't want to talk about, he would.
Yeah, he did.
He would have said he wouldn't talk about it. So,
because I knew a guy that because we had all those wrestlers up here in the Twin Cities.
Yeah,
he knew those Robbinsdale guys, as they called them, the Nord the Barbarian, Tom Zink, the Road Warriors. He knew all those guys, and so I got his stories too. He knew Kurt Hennig and all those guys. But yeah, it's kind of nice to hear from somebody who was there, face to face.
Yeah, was in the locker room and actually did the work and stuff like that.
Yeah. T-Bass. I think those were comic books he had in the background.
Yes.
Yep.
They are. He's a huge comic book fan. He has his
cool.
His old house. They just bought a new house recently, but their old house, half of the garage was painted Superman colors, and then
so he's a DC guy. Is he DC?
Batman is by far and away his favorite.
Okay, he's DC
character. Yeah, he's a huge Batman guy.
Okay.
So yeah, he collects comic books. Yeah. So
okay. Well, tell you what, I got to cut this short, but this was fun.
Yeah. No. Yeah, we're just doing like a post interview thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And thank you again, everybody, for coming on. It was a different topic.
We actually had more viewers. Than I thought because it was just my channel.
Yeah.
So we got up to 6. So
it was a different topic that we had, but it was great.
Yeah.
For those wrestling questions that you had, I hope Dusty was able to answer a bunch of them.
Yeah. He's pretty open about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, he's not really involved in it anymore, but if you ask him questions, he'll talk to you.
Okay. But we will be back to our regular scheduled programming on Wednesday and Friday.
Yeah. I think we're going to do the final Super Bowl year.
Final Super Bowl year is 76 on Wednesday.
Yep.
And then we're going to have a lot to talk about on Friday.
Yeah, because
there's all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So,
well, like I said, we appreciate you guys joining us.
To the system, I don't want to be a slave. I've been doing shit my way, or the highway. And in the driveway is a nice range. Cause I grind through the climb, I invite pain. You'll never hear me, bitch, nah, I don't complain. Just gotta flip the switch and you can go and obtain anything you want, anything you need. Your mind's got the key ingredient, it's belief. Better see with the negativity, but I just